get a job in a sideshow.
I'm having an old friend for dinner.
Pabst Blue Ribbon!
You like Huey Lewis on the news?
Well, son, I guess you're right. I am a butthead.
I don't give a crap if you covered yourself in peanut butter and had a 15-hooker gangbang.
A man should have a hobby.
Problematic.
Ladies, gentlemen, either, neither, or both, welcome to the inaugural episode of Problematics Go to the Movies, the show in which two friends talk about movies that they can't talk about with their other friends. Over there is a good friend of mine. Introduce yourself.
Hi, I am Casey Purgatory, but most people know me as Fiendly, due to my extensive online presence for over a decade now.
And I am Paul, aka Static, aka that guy who hangs around in Casey's videos and tries to be funny all the time. Occasionally succeed. And today we are going to be tackling a favourite movie of ours, the 1985 classic Re-Animator.
In many ways, one of the reasons we met each other.
Pretty much, yeah. I think it was one of the first films we actually started talking about.
Yeah, we more or less officially met in the Splatterhouse Let's Play thread.
Yes, over on Something Awful. That was about, 10 years ago?
Thereabouts. I want to say I started it in 2013. So, yeah, it's been a while.
Yep. Long time. And it's only taken us this long to be like, hey, we should do a podcast, which, I gotta say, what the hell were we thinking?
Yeah, I got into doing this internet bullshit because I wanted to do a podcast, but I couldn't do one alone. And now I have made one friend, so off to the races.
Hello. It only took us a decade. But, so Re-Animator. What are your feelings on the film, just as a general overview? Like, what's your history with it?
My feelings are that it is my favorite film. Full stop. And my history with it is rather embarrassing. I was introduced to it by James Rolfe, the angry video game nerd. He used to do his annual daily horror movie reviews, Monster Madness.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
And he reviewed Re-Animator one year, and his review was, it's dumb splatter film, and people die, and the effects are terrible.
Heresy.
But I'm going to go not watch any movie starring women. Bye.
Oh, and how much he's changed.
So, yeah, I downloaded it expecting the dumbest movie ever. I was in a really, nihilistic, misanthropic mood, and I was like, I gotta watch some people turn into paste. So I put on Re-Animator, and I was blown the fuck away.
Yep.
I had been thankfully undersold on this movie. It's really good.
Yeah. I think it was more or less the same, except for how I encountered it. I actually don't remember precisely when I first saw it. I know that I was probably way too young to be watching it. That much is probably a given. But, yeah, just astonished at how good the effects were, and surprisingly how much they still stand up today, how much they hold up. There's obviously some really, really dodgy bits of effects work in the film. The headless body, for one. But as a whole, it's still a phenomenal movie, and it's hard to think of a movie that's more tightly paced and well put together in only, 90 minutes?
Oh yeah, 86 even. That was my big takeaway, is that it's a masterpiece of pacing and editing.
Yeah, not a single moment wasted in it. It is, I'd hesitate to say it's the perfect movie, but it's, if you're looking for a film that is just, not a single shot wasted, it's hard to find anything as good as Re-Animator in that respect.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, what our plan is for the next few episodes is we're going to be covering a lot of, I don't know how you'd want to call it, cult movies, weird movies.
As the title of the podcast itself suggests, problematic media.
Yes. A lot of films with,
famously fucked up shit?
That's certainly one way of putting it. I was going to say difficult content,
okay.
But, cutting straight to the heart of the matter there. We decided to take a to write down a list of like what kind of films we wanted to do in general, and most of them have at least 15 murders per film, which is quite impressive.
Yeah, we're older millennials, so we really were raised on the darker and edgier 90s stuff.
Yeah, pretty much we come from a generation where at least one Friday the 13th or Nightmare on Elm Street film was guaranteed to be on a Friday night.
Absolutely. So, I mean, one of the most endearing things I've ever heard was Robert Evans on Behind the Bastards said on a recent episode that he loves the Book of Vile Darkness from Dungeons & Dragons 3.5.
Oh, infamous.
Yep.
Yeah, if you know what that is, kudos. If you don't look it up. It's terrible.
In summary, it is a dog shit supplement where they have rules on drug abuse and torture and everything heinous that shouldn't be in D&D. And it's one of the best books ever. I love it.
Yeah, you can tell why we're friends at this point, can't you?
Most of the problematic media we're going to talk about is stuff that we legitimately love. There's a lot of bad movie podcasts, and it's the vast majority of what I listen to personally. But I really, really miss positive reviews of media.
Yes, but lots of the films which we will be covering over the coming episodes aren't what most people would consider to be quote-unquote good. But for a certain mindset, certain variety of person, these films are precious artifacts from a forgotten time, and we want to give them the love and the attention that they really deserve.
Yeah, and I think these days, dark and edgy media especially needs a positive highlight on it.
Yeah, like we will be, ripping into these films as and when funny and necessary, but overall, we want to cover films films and media that we genuinely think this stuff is good and more people need to know about them.
Absolutely. And personally, I come from the queer community. Really should have mentioned that sooner. My pronouns are they, them. I'm non-binary. How did that not come up in my intro? I don't know. I'm bad at this.
Frankly, I'm disappointed in you.
Yeah, you should be. But there's a real, conservative purity movement among a lot of younger LGBT folks, which is extremely disheartening. And the way it most heavily represents itself is condemning all media that is not absolutely perfect and completely toothless.
Yeah, the coffee shop hey you thing movement, I guess you could call it, where everything has to be incredibly light and fluffy and no sharp edges or corners to it whatsoever.
Yeah, and LGBT representation itself has to be so perfect and flawless and unrealistic. It's a dark time. Yeah. Ironically.
Yeah, if that's the sort of thing that you like, then fantastic, but every so often you just really need to get outside of your comfort zone. And granted, I am a straight, cis, white male, so possibly not the person who should be saying that.
Yeah, it's absolutely harmless to like those things, but there is still a time and place to discuss dark topics. Needs to be done.
Yeah, you can't have dessert all the time. Every so often you have to eat some road gravel.
Yep.
Put that in a t-shirt and sell it.
Granted, we're going to be reveling in the gravel of it all, but...
Getting down in the dirt covered in blood and laughing.
Oh, yeah.
So, Re-Animator, 1985, directed by Stuart Gordon. Surprisingly, his first movie directing role. He would go on to do movies such as From Beyond, Robot Jocks, the remake of Body Snatchers, which is a surprisingly good film. Did not know it was him when I first saw it. And also went on to do Honey, I Shrunk the Kids and its sequels.
That's right.
As well as an episode of the TV show. Only did one episode, which is really surprising.
Yeah, now Stuart Gordon, his history is in the stage. He was a major head of, I believe he was the creative director of the Organic Theater in Chicago.
Yeah. He actually came from a background of doing counterculture plays, which will come up in the movie in a maybe not too surprising way, but you can definitely see he was working through some anger issues towards campus staff and so on while he was making this film. As far as the cast goes, primary cast is Bruce Abbott, who plays Dan Kane, starred in, obviously, Re-Animator and Bride of Re-Animator. Doesn't really do much else other than those. It's mostly just B-movies that no one's really ever heard of. I certainly haven't. Barbara Crampton, who plays Meg, famous for Chopping Mall, From Beyond, You're Next, and more recently, Suitable Flesh. She previously only starred in, I think, 2 or 3 exploitation movies, which are really only famous for the fact that Barbara Crampton starred in them as her first ever roles. David Gale plays Dr. Carl Hill, who you may or may not know from the 1991 Western adaptation of The Guyver, alongside Mark Hamill. And, of course, the man, the legend, Jeffrey Combs. From Beyond, The Frighteners, Deep Space Nine, also The Guyver. What is there really to say about this man that hasn't been said?
Virtually nothing. He's perfect.
We love you. Get in contact with us.
There's a third hosting chair.
We promise we won't be weird and creepy.
Yeah, there's an incredible amount of chemistry between those 3 core actors because they were all in that same position. They were all just bringing into film actors. Yeah.
Jeffrey Combs, like Stuart Gordon, had a history in theatre.
All of them did.
I know that they all had a background in theatre.
Mm-hmm.
With Jeffrey Combs, it shows more than others because he really speaks to the back of the auditorium. And when you get down to it, I mean, you could and have quite easily done this as a play with just 5 characters.
Yeah, it has happened, as you said.
Yeah, infamously, there's Re-Animator, the musical, which I really need to see at some point.
Likewise.
And of course, it's been performed as a stage play multiple times.
Yep. Before we move on, I do want to highlight Robert Sampson, I believe is his name.
Ah, yes.
Dean Halsey.
Yes. Yep.
He is the 5th actor in this movie. There are only 5 actors in this movie. 6 if you want to count the security guard, who was a TV working actor.
Yeah. The worst security guard in existence.
Yep, but a fantastic character.
Oh, yeah.
Extremely small cast, and those 5 that have already been mentioned were, like, they carry the entire movie on their shoulders.
Yeah, it's really quite impressive how small the cast is and just how well they nail each of the roles.
Yeah, there's an intense amount of chemistry, and each of them brings everything to the role. Like, there's a lot on the paper, but they bring it to life in a way that basically no one else could have.
Yeah. This is one of those films that I genuinely think if, no matter how good the cast was, if they remade it in any way, shape, or form, it would be ruined. They would try and add too much, or they would just lose sight of what makes it so special.
Yeah, I fear that I heard them talking about it. That might have just been a nightmare that they were planning to remake Re-Animator.
I certainly hope so.
Yeah.
A remake of this would be, like, at worst, I think most remakes are unnecessary. But I think this would be on a par with the remake of Psycho. Just for, why would you do such a thing?
Oh, yeah.
Now, for the podcast, we will be covering the regular unrated cut. For those who don't know, there's a couple of cuts of the film available. The most commonly available ones are the unrated cut and the integral cut. The integral cut has a bit of a history attached to it.
Yeah, that's right. The film was initially released unrated because it was too gross to get an R rating.
Which is an accomplishment.
They said they would have had to cut it down to about a 40-minute film.
Yeah, it would have been a simple episode of, I don't know, Creepshow or something.
Yeah. So they just put it out in theaters, made what they could, and then when they put it out on VHS, they wanted to actually like have it available in rental stores and stuff, and it was practically illegal to do that with unrated films. So they made an R-rated cut.
Yes. The integral cut is a sort of weird mishmash between the R-rated cut and the unrated cut. The integral cut adds in some extra scenes which really don't add too much to the overall package, and in at least one scene really do confuse what's going on. So for the purposes of this episode, we're going to be concentrating on the unrated cut, but bringing up a couple of scenes from the integral cut just to point out how silly they are.
Yeah, unrated is effectively the canon cut, and it's interesting that the R-rated version is actually longer by about 10 minutes because they crammed in a bunch of the cut scenes.
Yeah, it's the weirdest. It's probably the only time I can think of where the R-rated version is actually longer than the uncut.
Certainly the only one that comes to my mind. As a not film buff who's going to make us review like comic books and albums and shit.
Hey, I want to do Twin Peaks, man.
We're on it. Next episode.
All 36 episodes and the return.
I actually just recently watched most of Twin Peaks, so good timing.
Oh, you finally got round to it.
Yeah.
Excellent. We shall have talks about that someday.
Strike while the iron's hot, I say.
So, to start off, we have a handy-dandy content warning. If this isn't your thing, absolutely fine. Turn off, come back for possibly not the next episode, maybe the episode after, and we'll see you on the other side of this warning.
The following presentation features discussion of zombie-related gore and mayhem, animal death, Lovecraftian racism, and a very disturbing scene of sexual assault. Listener discretion is advised.
And we are back. So, the film starts off cold open.
That when they first shot the film, they did not shoot this, but they did have it on the script. They thought it wasn't necessary, then they changed their mind once they finally cut the movie together.
Yes, we open at a medical school in Germany with security guards, and I don't know, is she meant to be like a nurse or teaching staff?
It's unclear. She's just sort of there. Someone to alert the authorities as to what's going on.
Yeah, that something is happening in the room of a Dr. Hans Gruber.
No relation.
3-4 years from now, that's going to be really ironic.
It's funny, I never realized his name was Hans Gruber. They only call him Dr. Gruber in the movie, except for one moment where the guy trying to get in shouts, Hans! So it's easy to miss that he's Hans Gruber.
Yeah, I actually did a bit of research to see if there was any connection between the two, because it's one of those things that's bugged me for years, and it doesn't seem to be a reference to anything, like Die Hard and Re-Animator drawing from the same source. It just seems to be one of those really weird coincidences that's cropped up.
Only so many German names that the average American knows, I guess.
Probably, yeah. Dr. Gruber is currently in the middle of, I believe the medical term is freaking the fuck out.
Yep, grabbing his head, shaking around.
Blood pouring from every orifice.
And Herbert West is leaning over him with an empty syringe.
Yep. His eyes start to expand from his face, which at the time I had literally never seen anything like that in any movie, and even now it's still kind of a rarity.
Looks like the Corinthian is blowing 2 bubblegum bubbles.
the worst bubblegum ever.
Yeah, it's full of sweet, juicy surprises, as we soon see.
And when the Bazooka Joe eventually does go pop, everyone asks what the hell just happened.
As they are splattered with blood. There's so much blood in this opening scene.
Absolutely everywhere. The nurse asks him the security ask him what the hell happened, and say that they killed him. But West looks almost at the camera and says, "No, I gave him life."
And we have our introduction.
As far as an opening for a film goes, that sets the tone about as perfectly as you can get.
Yeah, they were absolutely right. This scene is 100% necessary, and it really gets you prepared for the nature of the film that you're about to watch.
Yeah, right from the off, you're either rolling your eyes at how silly and po-faced it all is, or you are strapped in and you are on board with it.
Yeah, this movie has sort of an artistic sensibility because of the thespian background of all the people involved.
Yep.
So you don't immediately grasp that you're going to get such nastiness, but you are.
And the really interesting thing as well is that even though it opens with an incredibly violent scene, it's a remarkable amount of time before we get anything like that again. I think it's like a good 25 minutes or so before the next real scene of gore in the film.
Yeah, and in this film's timeline, it's an 86-minute movie. 25 minutes is a big deal.
Yeah.
And it's really important to note that Stuart Gordon and Brian Yuzna, who is the producer and put up $1 million of his own money to get this movie made, the main thing that they were on the same page about was showing everything.
Oh, yeah.
That was very much not the trend in films at the time. Texas Chainsaw and Halloween and all of the Hitchcock movies were all famous for showing as little as possible, but this movie wanted to break that trend.
Especially it came out at the time that the MPAA were really starting to crack down on violence in horror movies as well.
Yeah, video nasties. They watched them all in preparation for this movie.
Yep. I think it was Friday the 13th, part 3 or 4. I can't remember which it was. But that had come out round about the same time. I think it was the year before. And it had been cut significantly in order to get an R rating. So you can almost see Re-Animator as sort of a response to that of, oh, okay, you guys are pussing out, we're going to go for the gold.
Yeah, and it really did start a trend. The 80s were, from then on, known for their splatter flicks.
Yeah, 100%. It's you don't really get movies quite like that in the way that you do now. Get the occasional throwback, but they don't seem to be as gleeful, if that makes sense.
Yeah. It's like slapstick violence, but the violence happens for real, and the heads come flying off.
Yes, when you poke someone's eyes out, they come out through the back of the skull. And that's hilarious. So, cut to the opening titles. They really are something to behold.
Psychedelic anatomical drawings coming at your face.
Yep. Taken from, I believe it was a copy of Grey's Anatomy, not the TV show. The music, quite infamous, was recorded by Richard Brand.
Richard
He's
Band.
the brother of Charles Band, who some will know as the director, producer, and owner of Empire Pictures and Full Moon Entertainment. Responsible for the Puppet Master franchise, Dollman, and Scanner Cop. The theme is infamous, shall we say. According to Richard Band himself, it was intended to be a homage to Psycho.
It's a remix.
Play them back to back, it is completely impossible to tell them apart. I keep thinking of one and the other will cut in.
They are the exact same notes, just played in a different order, which, I mean, if you say that, that's the definition of a different song, but they take the same, like, passages, the same flow of notes, and they just put them in a different manner, which actually really does change the tone of the song, but it's the exact same song otherwise.
Yeah, it's the Re-Animator version feels a bit more playful.
Absolutely, yeah, that's the right word for it.
The right, yeah. Whereas Psycho is definitely going for dread.
It's extremely tense, the Psycho version, yeah. But they are different versions of the same song.
Yep. Apparently he actually got into quite a bit of trouble for the homage. Which is why when it returns in Bride of Re-Animator, it is significantly different. Extra sections added in and so forth. But as far as opening titles go, it's very striking, very bright. Possibly the only part of the film that has dated, just because it is bright, drenched neon that looks like something out of Suspiria.
True, yeah. It hasn't aged perfectly, but it is legendary for good reason.
So, we open up the movie proper on Miskatonic Medical School, our obligatory H.P. Lovecraft reference.
It is an H.P. Lovecraft story, so there's going to be a lot.
With our hero doctor, Dan Kane, desperately trying to rescue a patient who's currently flatlining. He's told by a doctor with the fuzziest hair ever.
Stuart Gordon's wife.
Yep, Carolyn Purdy Gordon.
Yeah.
That it's too late and he needs to let the patient go. Which, personally, I think this is the first crack in his armor, which allows Wes to maybe worm his way in.
Yeah, you can see it's a big part of his motivation.
Yeah, if he hadn't lost this patient, presumably quite early on in his career, you can easily argue the case that the rest of the film may not have happened in quite the way it did.
Yeah, he's legit not even a doctor yet. He's a student learning to become a doctor.
Throughout the film, they constantly refer to him as Mr. Kane rather than Doctor.
Yeah.
Which is a small thing that's easy to overlook, but important to the film as a whole.
Very much so. And he will do anything to save a life, even if it means embarrassing him and possibly resorting to sci-fi gels of some kind. By the way, everyone in that scene, it's all just people who later worked behind the camera and stuff. And one of them, according to the commentary, brought in a bunch of dildos and placed them all over the morgue.
Huh.
Yeah. That's the kind of pranks they were doing in the 80s.
Yeah, I thought a couple of those bodies in the morgue looked a little uncomfortable. Now I know why.
Notably, everyone in the background is a woman, so it's not sexual harassment in this instance.
Barely not sexual harassment.
Yes, this movie did have its higher brow sensibilities to keep any sex crimes from occurring on the set. And we thank it for that.
Yeah, for the 80s, that's a big deal.
Yeah, seriously.
Lots of movies in the 70s and 80s, especially the lower budget horror and sci-fi, they all were filmed on sets where you're not entirely sure that a girl was killed, but if you found out one was, then you wouldn't really be massively surprised by it.
Yes, the movie Snuff was a documentary.
Basically, yeah. So he takes the body down to the morgue where we run into our next pseudo-primary character, secondary character, Mace, the worst security guard in movie history. I will die on this hill.
I mean, he's one of the best characters in the movie, but the movie only has 6
absolutely.
characters. So.
all he does this entire movie is smoke a cigar, play cards, look at porn, and look surprised.
The original script for this movie, when it was actually a TV pilot, because the original story was published as a serial, so they wanted to pay homage to that and do it in a 6-part series. That version had no comedy whatsoever, which is surprising because the finished movie is extremely funny, and this character is one of the main sources of comedy. Every scene he's in is hilarious.
He sees Dan bringing the corpse into the morgue, waves him in without a second thought and says, "It's okay, no one wants to get into the morgue," which means he's also the most naive mortuary security guard in the history of mankind.
How was he to know that it was such extreme foreshadowing and the bad day he was about to have tomorrow?
Oh boy. So he wheels the body into the meat locker, and we see about a dozen or so corpses. Bit of comedy with the arm that keeps falling off.
It's interesting they took all the actors to an actual functioning morgue to really get them acclimated to what it's like.
Yeah, they all spent a couple of days actually hanging out in a mortuary seeing the process. I believe that Bruce Abbott said it was one of the weirdest, most somber experiences he'd ever had in his life. Which, I can kind of see why they would want to do that, but it also feels like, hey, I can get you in a morgue for a couple of days if you really want to see what goes on. And Stuart Gordon just being like, do I?
It's that step that adds the reality of this film that is important throughout and is very subtle. You wouldn't notice it on your first watch, but there is a consistent reality through all the weird, impossible things that happen. Yeah,
it's worth noting that quite a lot of the medical details that are shown are surprisingly accurate.
Yeah, as of that time, they were almost 100% scientifically accurate until bodies start coming to life.
Yeah, then it goes a bit wacky, but up until that point, everything's pretty solid.
Oh, yeah.
So we see our primary antagonist to be Dr. Carl Hill working on a body with a laser drill.
Slight spoiler alert, because right now Carl Hill is one of the good guys. He's introduced as the grant machine for the hospital.
Come on, the guy's got resting creep face.
Well,
he's got active creep face. He looks like the platonic ideal of every uptight dean in every 80s boner comedy.
He's also introduced using a laser drill of his own invention to perform part of an autopsy. I don't know what part of an autopsy is performed by just cutting a hole in the skull and sticking a Q-tip in there, but that's what he's doing.
What he's doing is a very important procedure called Q-tip wiggling.
Ah, yes.
He mostly does that just so he can get a boner.
That explains a lot about the film.
Really does, doesn't it?
Yes. That laser drill was sci-fi as of the release of this film. It has since been actually invented.
But it doesn't do what's advertised later on in the movie. To the best of my knowledge, I'm not a scientist. The actor that played Carl Hill, whose name I am completely blanking on right now.
David Gale.
David Gale, that's the one. He actually loved the role. Said that it gave him a new lease on life for acting. To quote the man himself, it reanimated his love of acting.
Oh, yeah.
Up until that point, he had actually been ready to quit, but doing Re-Animator, he had so much fun in the film. He was just like, cool, when do I get to do another one?
Yep, and luckily he did get to do the next one, which is not a spoiler as to whether or not he makes it through this movie, because he doesn't.
Lots of people die. Lots of people come back.
Lots of people die again.
He went on to have a fairly decent career in B-movies up until his death in the late 90s.
Yeah, late 90s is a bit of an exaggeration. It was 1991.
Oh, okay. Some of the stuff that I'd found, I guess it was just films that had come out that had been sitting on a shelf for a while.
Yeah, he might have had some shelved projects that came out later.
Yeah.
He did not make it much further than Re-Animator, unfortunately.
No, he really did Re-Animator 1 and Bride of Re-Animator, and again, as a trend, most of his other films are just famous for him being in them, which is kind of disappointing.
Yeah.
Along with, as we said, The Guyver, which, okay movie, I guess. Seen it years ago, don't remember much. As we are introduced to Carl Hill, we're swiftly introduced to far and away the most important character, and one of the most important characters in the horror canon, Herbert West. A couple of things that are set up here. First off, the bodies that have been carted around in the mortuary and so forth all have their feet bared so that they can display the tag on the toe quite prominently. West is the only one that actually covers the feet, which, to my mind, almost gives him sort of a strange respect for the dead. Like, yes, they're dead, but doesn't mean that they have to have bits of them on show for literally no other reason.
Yeah, you can sort of understand that if he's this kind of person who has the mentality that a dead person is not dead. He might have the ability to bring them back.
In his mind, the dead have as much need for respect and worth as the living, something which several of his peers don't actually share. The other thing that we see is arguably the central conflict of the film. The dogma of Dr. Hill versus the radicalism of Herbert West. He definitely believes that what is learned is not necessarily true, something that we'll see crop up multiple times during his conflicts with Hill. And as I said, this also ties in with Stuart Gordon's history with counterculture theatre. I feel like, personally, a lot of the frustration that he had with the deans, the professors, and so forth in his college days really comes out in Dr. Hill.
You can definitely see that. Immediately, West hates Dr. Hill, and in the first half of the movie, you blame West. He's the guilty party in that exchange, but later on you get to see West has a lot of good points.
Yeah, he definitely feels that people need to take more risks with science, for better and ill. Whereas Hill is just, no, A is A.
Yep, 6 to 12 minutes.
No more, no less.
Yep. And also ludicrously efficient filmmaking in this opening scene. They introduce all the main characters except for Meg, who will be introduced very soon afterwards. They introduce all the bodies, they introduce the laser drill, they introduce everything you're going to need to see.
Yep, and all this is in, 7 minutes after the opening titles?
Oh yeah.
This is the kind of pacing that you don't really see in movies, especially today, where they kind of tend to let things stretch out and progress as they will.
Yeah, this would be, like you said, a 3.5 hour movie today.
Yeah, easily. We would go in depth into absolutely everything, whether it really needs to be or not. Really, I feel like a lot of movie makers could really go back and watch this and be like, no, pacing.
Absolutely. They say that editing is what saved almost all of Spielberg's most famous movies and Star Wars.
Yep, George Lucas infamously, it was his wife that edited all the original trilogy.
That's right.
And she wasn't around for the prequels, and it really shows.
That it does. Yeah, originally when I watched this movie, I was already an adult, and my main takeaway was, man, I'd really like to be a forensic pathologist. But my actual takeaway was, I want to be a video editor, and now I am.
Funny how these things work out, isn't it?
Yeah. Certainly not a forensic pathologist. Too many PhDs required, but video editing was the real takeaway of this movie.
I mean, there's always freelance.
Freelance forensic pathology or video editing? Perhaps the vaguer we leave that, the better.
Whichever one you feel you can get away with and won't leave too much of a paper trail. So moving swiftly on. So next we see Dan putting up a sign for a room for let. The house that he currently lives in is 666 Darkmoor. Presumably 731 was just a little bit out of his price range.
Is that a reference I'm not getting? I don't...
Unit 731?
Whoosh.
Wow, we need to have a talk after this. Well, it's here that we get introduced to our next primary character, Barbara Crampton, who plays Meg, the Dean's daughter. Easily one of the best things in the movie.
Oh yeah, steals the show very frequently, which is hard to do because she's the only one not involved with the reanimation plotline, i.e. the plot of the film.
Yeah, she was only about 25 when she made this. As we said, she'd done 2 movies before, which were low-budget exploitation movies that, honestly, I had never even heard of before.
Yeah, she's actually the second actor to portray Meg. The first one was cast, and then ran the script by her mother and had to drop out of the film because of a specific scene that we already know all about.
I'm gonna say I don't blame her one bit.
Yeah, absolutely. This is a very brave role.
This film is a lot. She has a quick talk with Dan about his need for a new flatmate, and leads to one of the best matched cuts I have ever seen, which starts off with him tickling her going, no, no, to them having sex and her going, yes, yes. It's incredibly silly, but it makes me laugh every time I see it.
Yeah, it's hilarious. And it also cuts right to the Talking Heads poster above their bed, perfectly in frame.
40 minutes from now, that's going to be hilarious, trust me.
Yep, efficient filmmaking that is also foreshadowing. This is actually one of the scenes that was changed most heavily in the integral cut, strangely enough.
Yep, this scene in the integral cut has much more exposition, which I'm going to say not necessarily a bad thing. The movie does have such a breakneck pace. It's impressive how much they tell you without actually sitting down and saying, okay, here are our characters, here is their deal, here is what they are doing. I'm kind of 50-50 as to whether this scene could do with a bit of trimming or not. I feel it's okay regardless of which version you watch.
Yeah, but in the original cut, Dan takes a moment to check her out after love-making, which is a little gratuitous. And they introduce the cat. They do that in the final version as well, but in this version, they fawn over him for a couple of seconds.
Rufus, yeah.
To really introduce that they love this cat.
Oh, they love the absolute living shit out of this cat as he gets yeeted onto the bed twice in the integral cut.
That is the integral cut. In the finished movie, he only jumps onto Dan's back and then disappears for the rest of the movie.
Yeah, it's a weird bit of foreshadowing in the integral cut, how they keep bringing him up.
Yep, and also, this is the moment where Dan proposes to Meg in the integral cut, if I'm correct.
Yep. He asked her to marry him, and she turns him down, saying that solving your rent problems is hardly a basis for marriage. I'm going to say I've seen marriages based on less.
Yes, this is all meant to set up a dramatic irony about how none of this would have happened if Meg had just said yes, but it's unnecessary.
This leads to Meg saying that she'd rather take things slow, saying that it gives her a chance to housebreak him. Presumably the undercurrent there is that she won't marry him because he keeps pissing in the laundry basket?
Learned it from Rufus, I bet.
I wouldn't be surprised. I know when I moved into my new place, one of my cats was a little free and easy with the marking.
Yeah. So you had to, rub it in his face. Pre-mark everything so he couldn't.
Well, first I asked him to marry me. And when he was like, no, that's weird, I started pissing all over the house just to beat him to it.
And very important, in the final cut, there is no proposal to Meg. They are just fiancés already. Oh, there's a shot while they're still in bed where Dan is begging her to get back in bed while she's getting dressed. And the whole time he's got his leg lifted up at the knee, and it looks like he has a giant 1.5 foot long boner, just like John Dillinger.
Yeah, it's weird because literally yesterday someone brought up the John Dillinger death pose, and I was like, I've never heard that. Let's take. Oh, okay.
One of my favorite references: John Dillinger was shot to death and covered in a sheet because he was shot to death in public. And over the sheet, his arm was crooked in such a way that it looked like a giant 18-inch penis, and that gave him this legendary reputation as a huge cocksman.
Yeah, I had somehow completely missed all that right up until about 18 hours ago.
Yeah,
my life is fun.
Ever since I saw this scene most recently to watch it for the podcast, I noticed that huge tent in the sheet, and I cannot unsee it.
It's like Keanu Reeves at the end of Matrix Reloaded, when he's flat on the table and he's popping a tent.
Damn it, that's the one Matrix I haven't rewatched in the last month.
Is that going to be an incentive to watch it or to run screaming from it?
I gotta see the Keanu erection.
Fair enough. Speaking of erections, next scene has the continuation of the scene has Dan chasing Meg around. This scene was almost entirely improvised and goes on way too long.
Yeah, arguably it drags a bit considering the breakneck speed of the film.
Yeah.
Dan's pretending to be a zombie, so we could call it foreshadowing if we were generous.
But it does bring us to possibly the most important scene in the film.
Yes, the establishing of the love triangle.
Yes. Really weird love triangle.
It's a unique one, but the actors did legitimately read it that way and play it that way.
Yeah. One of the things about Re-Animator is it has a really weirdly devoted LGBTQ fan base, primarily focused around Dan and Herbert West.
Big time. I want to say the second movie is the main cause of that, but the first movie definitely has a lot of themes, we'll say.
Yeah. Which, although the film, the characters were played to be, I would say, queer adjacent.
Dan has bi energy.
Oh, definitely. That haircut alone. Jeez.
Oh, yeah.
Jeffrey Combs actually believed that Herbert himself may have been asexual. There was an interview that he did for a book, Shockmasters by Loris Kersey in 1996, where he was talking about Bride of Re-Animator. It said, quote, Herbert is asexual, on an unconscious level probably. Herbert's a little confused. He doesn't know what intimacy is. It's something he's very frightened of. He's so involved with life and death that perhaps he can't even see beyond that. One of the reasons why he is so obsessed with rebirth is that he cannot live like any human being, so he longs for a different life, which, for a 1990s understanding of asexuality, that's not terrible.
Yeah, definitely. It's obviously not good asexual representation, because constantly asexuals are represented as robots and otherwise soulless beings, and Herbert West is rather distant and disengaged with humanity.
Yeah, for my money up, because I only discovered this this interview fairly recently, I thought that he was just more, I guess, science sexual.
Yeah.
He cares about the work and the end process and doesn't really care about anything else that gets in the way. He is, to my mind, just completely devoted to his work, and humanity is just, okay, well, I guess other people do it, but it's not for me.
You can see the asexual thing as sort of an actor's secret rather than an actual textual thing, because it's obviously not in the text, and he's not the perfect person to bring it to life, being not asexual himself. And for the record, I am a raging asexual, so...
Oh, yeah.
I would know.
It's definitely something it's definitely something that informs the character as opposed to being part of the character, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, Herbert comes in, has a bit of a nosy around, seems interested in the place, and then sees the basement and pops a science boner.
Oh yeah, he's immediately in love.
Yeah. He sees the basement, goes, this is fantastic, 10 out of 10, please take this large wad of unmarked used bills.
Cash up front.
And this is the first moment in the film of Dan compromising his morals. Herbert West, obviously shifty as fuck, but he needs the cash. So for him, we start seeing him go, okay, what's in front of me is more important than what is quote-unquote right. And that's going to inform his character for the rest of the film.
Yeah, Dan's seen him for 20 seconds, but they've still shared so many just lingering glances. You can see why there's such a read into their relationship.
Yeah, and also the fact that Herbert West seems very dismissive of Meg, which you could read as sexism of some form or another. Or you could read as, she's getting in the way of me and my bro here.
Yeah. It's a bit unclear what West's specific intentions are. I mean, Jeffrey Combs plays it in a way that you are meant to be able to interpret it different ways. And indeed, you likely will if you watch this movie.
Yep.
There's a lot of subtlety to the performance, but it's based on Lovecraft, which means there were no women in the original story.
Oh, God, no.
Yeah, the original story was Herbert West and an unnamed narrator.
Yeah, who, in the first two films, is more or less retconned to be Dan Kane.
Yeah, They share the same role, although the unnamed narrator in the story is 100% on board with all the experiments and in it from the ground floor. They are thick as thieves, even though West is the inventor himself.
Yeah, he just sees the science and he's like, cool, when do we do it?
Yeah, no trepidation whatsoever. It's just...
none.
Resurrection, bring it on.
Which weirdly is exactly what happens to Dan throughout the first two films.
Even late into the second film, Dan still has his hesitation, so it's interesting the differences, but they are effectively the same character.
Yeah, he frequently looks to West almost for permission to dabble in the black arts, so to speak.
Oh, yeah.
And it's weird because it's like, what is he expecting to get from West? No. No, I don't think we should be putting all our efforts into raising the dead. I think we should probably go off and open a hamster sanctuary. Come on.
I mean, West is so cold, you could see him as like the forbidden fruit, tempting you into an alternate path away from your girlfriend.
Yes, we shall open a hamster sanctuary where it will be just us and we will resurrect the hamsters of the dead. And Meg can't come. Will that be fine with you? I don't know why I'm giving him that voice. It just seems appropriate.
I was going to say, I guess he developed a British accent when he got evil enough.
I'm Scottish. What do you expect?
True. They are history's greatest villains, in your mind and mine.
Yep. So now we get to the classroom scene with Dr. Hill performing an autopsy on a cadaver.
An instructive autopsy for his entire class, including Dan and Herbert.
Yep. He peels back the scalp of the corpse and likens it to like peeling a large orange. Again, showing he doesn't have much respect for the dead. Both of them see the dead as the means to an end, but in radically different ways. Yes,
and this is actually building on a very brief moment that he had in his introductory scene, Dr. Hill, where he insists on the 6 to 12 minute brain death barrier. And Herbert is obviously dismissive and also calls him out for it being so similar to the work of his previous mentor, Hans Gruber, that in parts of Europe it is considered plagiarism.
Yes. Again, this is tying back to the whole radicalism versus dogma thing. Mm-hmm. But we get to see... This is probably the first time we really see Herbert West angry at something. Up until this point, he's been very cool and calm and collected. But here, he just lets it rip.
Yes.
During the autopsy, Hill is, again, very, very persistent about how the brain death will occur in 6 to 12 minutes.
Makes eye contact with West and repeats it.
To which West responds by angrily snapping pencils.
Yep.
A scene which is bizarrely funny, and I really can't put into words why. It's not just him snapping the lead, he is actually maintaining eye contact and breaking them in half.
It is somehow the sickest of nonverbal owns.
To which Hill replies, next time I suggest you bring a pen. Which, again, I really can't put into words why this is funny, but that is just one of the best lines in the entire film.
You gotta see it. You gotta see this whole movie, but, I mean, you gotta see this scene.
It makes perfect sense in context.
Yes, although this scene was originally 5 minutes long, and test audiences just found it disgusting and unpleasant because it was 100% accurate autopsy scene with cow brains standing in for human brain.
Yes, all the meats were sourced from a local butcher's, who apparently, according to one source I found, the butchers basically said, I don't know what you're using them for, and I don't want to know.
Yeah, less you know, the better. In that case.
Plausible deniability is always a good thing when it comes to handling organs. Learned that one the hard way. This is also where West formally accuses Hill of plagiarizing the work of Dr. Gruber.
Yep, in front of all of his students, which is so uncouth and embarrassing for Dr. Hill.
Big no-no.
Yep.
Hill obviously fights back, but West is having absolutely none of it. And again, accuses him of outright plagiarism, which, if anyone's been paying attention to the news over the last couple of months at time of recording, is a big fucking deal, especially in colleges and universities.
Interesting. That is not the college and university story I've been following in recent months, but
there's been a few.
Yeah, cracking down on them like it's fucking 1968 in Kent State.
Yep.
Ugh, fuck you, America. Anyway.
Moving swiftly on.
Yeah.
So Meg shows up to see Dan, and Meg and Dr. Hill. This is an interesting scene. Hill is obviously really into Meg, but as a nice change of pace from these sorts of films, Meg is really, really creeped out by Dr. Hill in return.
He does constantly come up with excuses to have her stick around and get closer to him, and she doesn't even acknowledge any of those excuses. Just, okay, bye.
That's nice. Please leave. Or I'll leave. Just as long as we're not in each other's personal space, that would be great.
Yeah. It's getting late, and you're getting very sleepy. Very sleepy.
I will do whatever you say. What were we talking about again?
Yes. This is the introduction of the big cut side plot.
Yes. One of the major scenes and plot threads entirely that was cut from the regular unrated edition and is reinserted into the R-rated cut and the integral cut is Dr. Hill knows hypnotism.
Yep, he is a successful mesmerist. He can actually control your mind simply by making eye contact for long enough.
And smearing Vaseline on your eyes.
Yes,
that's what the camera's doing.
It does literally put the camera into soft focus. It's very, very cheesy.
It's like a scene from the original 60s Star Trek, but really, really weird.
Yeah, it's so weird.
And the just cutting this entire plot line, because I had never seen the integral cut before we came to do this this episode. So I had no idea about any of this stuff. And I'm going to say the film is better for it being cut.
Yes, absolutely. And unfortunately, David Gale's performance for the entire rest of the film is hamstrung by this whole hypnotism side plot, because he still has to play the movie like he's a hypnotist. And then when they go into editing, after all the principal photography has been shot, they cut all that stuff out. So the poor guy is just always talking very slowly, like he's trying to convey messages directly to your brain and stuff.
Yeah, it's a weird sort of pseudo-neurolinguistic programming thing that just makes you think he's been on Quaaludes the entire time.
Yes. So Dan swoops in and rescues Meg from further hypnotism, apparently at the last possible moment, because then Dr. Hill shifts his gaze to Dean Halsey. In the integral cut, he does successfully hypnotize Dean Halsey against Herbert West and Dan Kane, who he recognizes as a romantic rival for Meg's heart. Originally, this scene was very, very long, extremely slow, because like I said, Dr. Hill has to talk very slowly to represent that he's hypnotizing people, murder the pacing of the film, so it's gone. And now he's just a regular guy. They were correctly advised that having him be a hypnotist was one too many strange things.
Yeah, the film is weird enough as it is. We don't need like a 17th plot thread where he learns how to juggle chainsaws and hypnotizes small children at the park, but that would be interesting to see.
They put so much work into having it be medically and scientifically accurate. So having that one break from reality being the resurrection potion, that works. Having multiple breaks from reality like this, that strains buy-in of the viewer.
Yeah, it's like with coincidences in murder mysteries. You're allowed one or two small ones that help move the plot along, but once you start adding in too many, it just becomes kind of a clusterfuck.
Oh, yeah.
So next we have Meg and Dan studying on his sofa. More discussion about the relationship, where it's going. But crucially, we find out that Rufus, the cat, and West don't get along. This leads to Meg and Dan going looking for the errant cat.
Yep. Whistling and pss-pss-pss-ing.
Yep. Again, could have been cut down by a good minute or so because this goes on forever.
I think this is the right length for tension. They actually do a phenomenal job building tension, and it's hard to do with a movie that was cut to the bone like this.
Yeah, in the moment, it feels like it goes on forever.
I still am lucky enough to remember my first viewing of this film very, very well, and I strongly recall this scene going on exactly as long as it ought to have.
Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah.
Well, we follow Meg as she goes around the house, wandering into, presumably, what is Herbert's room, where she finds a fridge.
Oh my god.
A fridge that has been left ajar.
which is a weird touch for Herbert West, the fastidious nerd.
Really is. Like, he is the poster boy for OCD.
Yep.
And the fact he would leave his fridge, of all things, ajar, and his door for that matter, because she just pushes it open like it's no big deal. And he would definitely be like triple locking that thing.
I want to say she turns the handle on the door. I think she did enter unwillingly there.
I may be misremembering it, but either way, she gets into the room very easily when I'm convinced he would have been locking it.
Yeah. I mean, I have the movie up on the other screen right here, and she gets to the door, whispers Rufus's name, and yeah, she just pushes it open. She doesn't touch the goddamn handle, you were right.
I thought so. It's just like, tra-la-la-la-la, wanders in. Like, I'd say, what if he'd been in there naked, but I imagine he'd just be like, yes, don't you knock? But this leads to our next major moment of, well, I suppose you could call it our next moment of gore.
It's a big shock moment, that's for sure.
Definitely. We see Rufus lying in the fridge, very, very dead.
Oh, yeah. And according to one of the commentaries, the prop itself is a cat's corpse. A real cat's dead body.
Yep. Stories vary as to how they got it. Either they got it from a Vets or Humane Society, or they just found it as roadkill.
Yeah, I mean, they're not very specific. It sounds like they're joking in the commentary, so it's a little unclear as to what the reality is. But they say that someone pulled up with a van, and in the back of the van was a bunch of dead cats for them to choose from, and they picked Rufus.
Yeah. That we should point out as well, the Rufus that we see dead is not the Rufus from earlier in the film. He's fine.
Yes, thankfully, this film earns its "no animals were harmed" in the making of this movie credit at the very end. So.
Yeah, but personally, once I found out that was a real dead cat, it kind of soured that scene for me.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
It just feels unnecessary, especially given the rest of the film that is just really silly and fun. It's like, oh, that's a real dead cat. I do not like this one bit. It's
somewhat necessary for the budget because we see the dead cat prop that they use later, and it absolutely would not have flown in the fridge, but
I mean, it sounds like it's made out of fiberglass. There is an audible clonk when he drops it.
Yes. The dead cat puppet that appears later is very charming, very much not the sort of thing that would have given this scene any shock value, so...
Yeah. Once Meg starts screaming, Dan comes back in.
West comes in first. Somehow West beats Dan in.
Ah, yes, that's right. He comes in and, unsurprisingly, wonders what the hell is going on. Why is this woman in his private space?
He sees her staring into the fridge where he knows the dead cat is, and he says, "What are you doing in my room?" Not any sort of explanation as to why the cat is dead.
He has his priorities. They may not be the kind that the rest of us share.
Yeah.
He claims that he found the cat dead, and utters the infamous line, "What was I supposed to say? Cat dead, details later?"
Yes. What would a note have said? Cat dead, details later. His dubious claim is that the cat knocked over a garbage can and got a bottle stuck on its head and suffocated.
Yeah, which is kind of thrown into doubt later. He says that he has been experimenting on small animals, so it is entirely possible that he could have killed Rufus. The film never comes down clearly one way or the other, so all we can really do is take him at face value. But there's enough doubt in there, especially seeing as how they mention the pair of them don't get along whatsoever. There is enough doubt there that maybe he did, or maybe he's telling the truth.
There's multiple motives, and it is... You couldn't take him to court over it, but he killed that cat.
I would not be allowing him in the house. I'd just be like, cool, so pay up to the end of the month, and toodles, I'm going to go buy me a new cat.
Yeah, as charming as he is, and as bi-curious as Dan is, you wouldn't get away with that as a roommate, but...
That bussy just ain't good enough.
Yeah.
Oh, that was unnecessary.
Disagree. That's going in the final cut.
God damn it. Science pussy, the forbidden.
That's my favorite White Wolf supplement.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
God damn it.
Well, we're off the rails. So, this establishes a major conflict of the movie, which is that Herbert has the means to blackmail Dan by revealing that he's sleeping with the dean's daughter.
Yeah, this is a plot point that's only going to get worse for everyone involved.
Oh, yeah. It's kind of weird. I thought that was a very shallow bluff, like that wouldn't have really worked. But in the integral cut, Meg herself says, "He's right, Dan. We gotta play ball because he knows our secret."
Yeah, I'll be honest, the first few times I actually saw this, I was convinced that everybody already knew they were a couple.
Yeah, seriously, they definitely play it that way.
They're not subtle. Like, he is attacking her with smooches in the middle of the hallway of the hospital.
Yeah, and he introduces her, "This is my fiance. I have nothing to hide."
Yeah, it's a really weird choice. So, next, Dan is fast asleep, but then gets woken up by the most demonic cat wailing you have ever heard in your life.
Yeah. Might as well mention for posterity that there was a nightmare scene from which he is being awoken. In that nightmare scene, Meg is dead, and she gets reanimated, and Dean Halsey points a finger in his face and says, "You're to blame for this, Dan. You did this."
I feel like the repurposing was much neater. Again, the nightmare sequence doesn't really add too much other than suggest that Herbert is getting more into his brain than he would possibly think.
Yeah, I think the nightmare sequence is a really cool piece of filmmaking that absolutely drags the film down, so I'm glad it's gone.
Cool scene, completely pointless otherwise.
Absolutely.
So Dan goes down into the basement following the sound of the wailing and encounters Herbert with a gutted Beanie Baby attached to his back.
Encounters this after a hilarious pratfall down the stairs.
Yes. Oh, my sides, how I chuckled. After the really good effects before and after this scene is almost comical in how bad it is.
Yeah.
The cat wrestling is just silly. Objectively, it is incredibly dumb. It's them running around, beating on cupboards with baseball bats.
Yeah, this is the first big comedy scene, and it makes it one of the most memorable scenes in the movie, that's for damn sure.
Oh, definitely. The waving light overhead was supposed to be fixed, but it got hit during filming, and they decided, the moving light makes it feel way more creepy.
Yeah, total accident.
Yep. And it's weird as well, because if you look at some of the cupboards, you can see they've been lit from the inside, and they never really bring any attention to it.
Mm-hmm.
Again, I'm not sure if that was deliberate and they just decided to do it as a stylistic choice, or if they were like, hey, that looks really cool, let's put that in.
Yeah, all these touches give the scene way more action, and it needs it because, famously, there's no cat in the cat scene.
Yeah.
They're hunting for this black shape in a dark room with the light swinging back and forth. And all they hear is constant screaming, and they're just swinging at the walls with crochet mallets and baseball bats. There's no props. They're just doing it 100% with acting and sound effects.
Yeah, and weirdly, it works. Like, yes, the scene is objectively stupid, especially if you look at it in a vacuum. But if you're on board with it, you are looking actively for where the cat might be.
Totally. I, again, remember my first viewing of this movie and being very put off by the surrealness of this sequence, but really, really invested in it as well. It really works.
Yep. Eventually, the cat pounces and gets yeeted across the floor.
The pounce is hysterical.
The pounce is literally just...
Yep, with a hand puppet being waved at the camera.
I was menaced by this Beanie Baby. And then when it gets thrown against the wall, it leaves a nice meaty stain. There are literally chunks of meat from the butchers again.
Oh yeah. The first of 4 instances of someone getting slammed against the wall and leaving a blood stain in this movie.
Yeah.
It's a common go-to gag, and it always works.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
It just gives that extra sense of impact. So we find out that this is Rufus, the deceased cat, and that he has been brought back to life with the power of glow stick juice.
Yes, but Dan is still dubious. He says the cat was never dead, he just reduced its vital signs, brought it back to room temperature, and then you did a fancy little show for me.
And then Herbert pulls out a small bottle containing glow stick juice.
Well, first, he gets an agreement. The cat is dead now. It is practically snapped in half.
That's right.
All of its intestines are spilled out. West grabs the corpse, lifts it up, and says, "Do you agree it's dead now?" and slams the corpse back on the table, making a loud thunk sound.
One of the funniest bits in the film.
Yep.
The glow stick juice, we find out he calls his reagent.
Yes.
A method for bringing the dead back to life if it is injected directly into the brain.
The prop itself is luminol, like literal glow stick juice, as you said.
Yep. So he injects the puppet with the reagent, and it almost immediately starts twitching, to which he says, don't expect it to tango, it's got a broken back.
Yes, and birth is always painful as the thing screams out in visible agony.
Literally screaming like, I was dead twice, why did you bring me back again?
I legit don't know how they did the sound effects for the dead cat and for... spoilers, the zombies later in the movie. The
cat noises as a cat owner sound like they don't sound like anything a normal cat would make, not even a cat in pain. The only way I can imagine is heavy post-processing or someone actually making the screaming noises themselves. I can believe either of those. And again, this is more of Dan's morals crumbling in the face of what's being offered. West sees him in this as an equal partner. He's like, we can do great things together. Whereas in the original story, the unnamed narrator was basically his Igor.
Mm-hmm.
And just looking at what's potentially in front of him, Dan's like, maybe this guy's onto something.
Yeah, Stan is very impressed with the results that he has just observed.
Which starts to crumble when he starts talking to the dean.
Well, there's a reason he starts talking to the dean, and that is because his observation of the results is interrupted by one Meg.
Yes, Meg is not pleased by anything that's going on.
She's very upset to see her former cat turned inside out and still alive somehow.
I would go so far as to say she is upsetty spaghetti.
Well, that's one read on it.
No, I wouldn't. She's a bit peeved. But this leads to Dan being in front of the dean. Now, the context of this has changed again with the integral cut. Previously, the dean was hypnotized into getting rid of Dan and West. Here, he's just pissed off that he's shagging his daughter.
I mean, it's suggested that the daughter doesn't come into it until a little later on. Yeah, right now he's just mad at Dan, and I forget why. Let's see. Oh, he's hanging out with West.
Ah, that's right. Yeah, that's it. The integral cut plays it that he has to get rid of both of them. In this version, it's, I don't like the cut of that man's jib. You either need to stop associating with him, or you need to go. Or you will be facing financial sanctions.
Yes, indeed.
Which, according to one of the commentaries, is the most realistic part of the entire thing.
Yes, the writer points out that as soon as Dan hears his scholarship is being revoked, and it is being revoked, that's Dean Halsey's verdict. That is what drives Dan to actually snap and forget all about the resurrection he just witnessed. So this really brings us to the point of no return scene.
Yes, this is the fulcrum for the entire movie.
Yes, we next see Dan Kane, who has been suspended and is not permitted in the hospital, wheeling a corpse into the morgue, past the old security guard.
But of course, Mace doesn't get told these things and just waves him in, absolutely no problem, and then says, hey, you keep yourselves occupied, I'm going to go take a leak.
Yep, break time is his catchphrase.
Once he goes in, closes the door behind him, cover comes off the gurney, and it turns out it's Herbert West underneath.
Who very, very rapidly throws on his shoes over the toe tag that was on his foot to sell that he is a corpse.
Yep, he apparently was told, he said, I want to do this, and he was told, well, if you can do it quick enough, you can do it. And he did. Yeah,
that was another special director permission for a character touch, because he did not want to do this entire extremely long scene barefoot. So he promised the director he could put his shoes on, his socks and shoes on, in less than 15 seconds. And indeed he did.
But he puts both sock and shoe on one foot and then the other, which is clearly a sign of derangement.
Oh yeah, that's proof that he's evil. If you do that at home, please report yourself to the authorities.
You're on a watch list, buddy. So they sneak into the morgue, look around, trying to find a fresh body to use, go through the various options. Burn victim, shotgun wound, malpractice. And it has its own comedy sting. Like, they know what they were doing.
Yeah, that's more credit to the score. We did say the score is derivative of the Psycho theme, but the playful tone of it does wonders for the film. The score is actually phenomenal. It's just stolen.
Yeah, it was great because it was in other films that were great.
Yeah, it was tried and true, and then they put it in this movie as well.
Yep, it's like a mixtape almost.
Yes, they go through every corpse in the morgue, one by one, and eventually land on a large, able-bodied man with no apparent sign for why he died. He's just dead, making him a good subject.
Yeah, just there.
Yep.
For the sake of a body that they can experiment on.
It is miraculous plot convenience. God wanted them to do what they're about to do.
I guess you could say it was Providence.
Because of New England? You lost me.
Yeah, where Lovecraft he lived in Providence.
Oh, you never lost me. Congratulations.
See? Sometimes my shitty jokes have a reason.
That is also a phenomenal lead-in to Lovecraft. I reread his original story in preparation for this.
Almost like I planned it out.
Yes, indeed. You're better at this than I am.
Please, continue.
This scene here mirrors the scene in the book wherein they find themselves an able-bodied potential test subject who has died of non-body destroying causes.
Non-specific falling over.
Yeah, they find a nice, fresh, strong dude to test. And in the story, that gentleman is Buck Robinson, a.k.a. the Harlem Smoke.
That sounds racist, and you haven't even gone any further than that.
Yes, you are not ready.
I feel uncomfortable, and I read this back when I was a kid.
Yeah. So, we get a nice description from Lovecraft himself.
Oh boy.
Here it is, verbatim. He was a loathsome, gorilla-like thing, with abnormally long arms which I could not help calling forelegs, and a face that conjured up thoughts of unspeakable Congo secrets and tom-tom poundings under an eerie moon. The body must have looked even worse in life, but the world holds many ugly things. End quote.
So I'm thinking we get Jeff Goldblum to play him?
Oh,
maybe Tom Arnold.
Jesus Christ. That's, what is probably going to be our regular segment. Yes, Lovecraft was incredibly racist.
We're going to be doing Buckaroo Banzai across the ninth dimension, and we're going to be like, yeah, and Lovecraft was incredibly racist somehow. Oh, boy.
It's going to come up almost every episode, and yeah, he truly was that bad.
Yeah, he was the kind of racist that made other racists go, now hang on a minute.
When's the 60s going to get here?
Do you not think you're going a bit too far with that, Harry? I assume they called him Harry. I don't know that for a fact.
Yeah, Harry is definitely short for Howard.
So they inject this, shall we say, suspiciously white corpse with the reagent.
Mercifully white corpse, we will say.
Yes.
After the passage we just read.
Yes, mercifully.
Yes, he is, as noted, a big buff dude. Thankfully a white guy, so white indeed that he was the double of Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Yes, he gets injected, and they're recording the events that take place on a tape recorder.
Yes.
This will come in important later. They inject him, 5 seconds, 10 seconds, 15 seconds, just about to give up when they give him a second shot.
Yeah, in fact, Dan does give up and says, let's get the hell out of here. I've given up on my life as a sci-fi mad scientist.
I'm going to become a butcher, which technically he does.
Yeah.
Second shot, and then they see a reaction. They scurry over, start trying to talk to him, and he throttles the shit out of them. One in each hand. This guy is huge.
Meanwhile, Dean Halsey and Meg are at the receptionist, who is Stuart Gordon's wife from earlier, and they're asking where Dan is, and they are informed that he has headed to the morgue.
Not suspicious at all. The doctor who was supposed to be keeping an eye out for him has been in surgery all day. I think they say he's been in there for about 4 or 5 hours at that point.
Yeah.
So the dean tells Meg, sit where she is. He's going to go sort this out and give the boy a proper thrashing. So she goes and sits down next to a guy who apparently has no jaw.
Yeah, the actor himself, the extra, is wrapped in such a way that you can see there's nothing below his upper jaw. It's just like the tiniest little bulge.
It's the weirdest thing, and apparently, I don't know if this is true or not, but 1 or 2 people suggested that was actually James Cameron's father or father-in-law.
Stuart Gordon says that on the commentary track. Stuart Gordon makes a lot of dubious claims, and I could find no further evidence that that was James Cameron's father, who had no chin in the movie Re-Animator and is staring creepily at Meg.
I went looking to see if there was any truth behind that. Could not find a damn thing.
Yes, take that all with a grain of salt, but if that is true trivia, it is baffling.
It's the weirdest crossover I can imagine. Because, again, James Cameron, 1985, he would have been working on Terminator as well.
Seriously. Don't these guys have lives?
2 people from Terminator working on the same film that isn't Terminator or one of its sequels.
Yep.
What the hell?
Furthermore, the gurney that they wheeled West in on was a prop from Return of the Living Dead.
Yeah, that's right.
Which was being shot contemporaneously.
Yep, it was in the mortuary scenes. That gurney gets around, because apparently it also shows up in a couple of other big movies. Well, I said big, but big for, our audience.
Yeah, cult movies.
Yeah, I believe it also shows up in Bride of Re-Animator and Robot Jocks.
Wow. That gurney has an amazing film career.
That film's got a better pedigree than the guy that plays Dan Kane.
That gurney should do convention signings.
I would queue for 3 hours to get that gurney's John Hancock.
Yep, just rub some ink on the wheels and roll it over your paper.
Thank you. It's such an honor to have met you, Mr. Gurney. Or Miss. I'm not here to... I don't want to make any assumptions.
It's non-bind gurney.
Oh, god damn it.
I might cut that.
I hate you so much right now. And you are not cutting that. That's staying in.
God damn it. I made my bed. Or my gurney, as it were.
You've shut your bed, now lie in it.
So, Peter Kent, the giant zombie, is hurling corpses at Dan and Herbert, and hurling Herbert and Dan at corpses.
The Re-Animated in this film have such a distinct look. The actual zombies themselves look like every single muscle and sinew in their face is tense all at once. The only other thing I've seen that does that kind of effect is the, I think it was 2006 remake of The Crazies. All the zombies in that, their neck muscles look really tense. Their veins are bulging. It's such a striking look, and it's amazing that it's never really caught on quite in the way that other effects from this period did as well.
Yeah, they do an incredible and extremely difficult to pull off effect, where they have bladders running all across the faces of the actors that they pump with blood, like they're actually pumping fluids through the faces of the actors while they're acting.
That was how they managed to get the eyes to explode in Dr. Gruber at the beginning.
Oh yeah, sure is.
And again, this is the epitome of a film that hasn't really aged. Some of the effects, as we'll get to, do get a bit ropey. But in many ways, it still feels like a very fresh, contemporaneous movie.
Oh yeah, in a lot of ways, it definitely holds up, especially because the acting carries so much of it. And the acting doesn't age.
Yep. Tell you what has aged poorly, though. Watching this in 4K, because you get to see so much zombie dong.
Yeah, here's our first cock shot, and far from the last.
Oh, it's going to be a cornucopia of zombie weenie by the end of this.
Yes. The poor cinematographer, one of the only, probably the most experienced filmmaker on the set, was one Mac Allberg, whose name cracks me up because it sounds like Mark Wahlberg in a Mark Wahlberg accent.
Mark Wahlberg. From Harvard Yard.
Chowda. But that poor guy, he was trying to keep it at an R rating, and he was constantly like, the Veenies are in my shot.
Ugh, too many Veenies again.
Veenies vagging in my shot.
Can someone do something about the Veenies? So the Dean enters the carnage, is really the only way to put it.
Yeah, he goes up to the morgue door and finds it locked.
Yeah, which I'm going to say, locking the inside door of a mortuary, that's a really bad idea.
Yeah, they probably just should not have that latch.
But I understand that you would want the privacy if you're doing an autopsy, but come on, bro.
Yeah, that can only go awry. And it does go awry.
Yep. After hammering on the door gets knocked right off its hinges and falls on top of him, swiftly followed by a very big zombie.
And a loud crunch sound. As usual, the sound effects doing a lot of work.
Yep. The actor that played the Dean was actually under the door and did have the actor playing the zombie jumping on top of the door on top of him.
Oh, yeah. Peter Kent is the guy's name, and he had a blast. He is playing a very fun zombie.
Yep. He was asked, we have stunt doubles, we can put something underneath, and he was like, nope, if I'm doing this, I'm going to go all in. So when he gets pulled out, disoriented, that's real. He was not expecting it to be quite so heavy.
So after he gets crushed out of the door, he gets pinned up against the chalkboard, and he tries to defend himself, the Dean. He gets his hand on the face of the zombie. The zombie bites 2 of his fingers off. A big turning point in the film for me, because I was like, they cannot come back from this. They are fucked.
Yeah. He just gets his shit absolutely wrecked during this sequence.
Yeah, this is why I wanted to shout out Robert Sampson when we were going through the actors, because this is the turning point where he goes from the stuffy pain in the ass Dean that you've seen in every movie to stealing the show every time he's in a scene. Because he's getting slammed against walls, he's getting covered in gore, he's doing these incredible stunts.
Yep. The only shot I believe he didn't do was when he gets picked up and is thrown completely bodily at the wall. Everything else is all him. And Dan continues a recurring theme in that he completely fails to save the Dean this entire time.
Yep. Dan just goes catatonic. Herbert says, step aside.
Literally says, Dan, look out, in the most bored way possible.
Totally dead.
Before firing up a bone saw.
Yes.
Yep. This scene here, he gets behind the zombie, pushes a bone saw through its chest from behind.
Grinds its heart to a paste.
Yep. Had no idea how they did it up until relatively recently. The actor is actually wearing a sort of chest plate and is leaning forward so that it looks like he's still standing normally, while someone underneath is pushing the bone saw and the gore through from below. But looking at it in the moment, honestly, even today, it's hard to tell where the chest plate cuts off.
Mercifully, it's a tight shot, so Peter Kent was able to wear a towel while someone was at around crotch level pushing a bone saw through his fake chest. Yeah,
possibly while still naked. We don't know for certain.
Seems very likely given the preponderance of nudity in this film.
And given how quickly they filmed it. I think everything was done and dusted in about 2.5, 3 weeks.
Yeah, I think 18 days was what they ended up saying.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Yeah.
So Dan is sitting there trying desperately to work out what the fuck has just happened. Herbert West looks bored as hell. And then he gets an idea.
Yeah, he's thrilled because Dean Halsey has been killed. His greatest rival is now his next test subject.
Yep, and as he puts it, we're never going to get a fresher body without killing one ourselves.
Oh, yeah.
Which, I feel like that's splitting hairs at a microscopic level.
I mean, that is chapter 3 of the short story.
Yeah.
Herbert West kills a guy himself.
So, Dan, reluctantly or not, agrees. And it's, again, his morals just falling by the wayside. But with this one, it's kind of difficult to tell. Is he doing it because he agrees with Herbert? Is he doing it because he's obviously in shock, as we'll see by the end of the scene?
Yeah, I read him as being traumatized and grasping at straws for one way to make this undo all of what just happened.
Yep. So, again, they try the reanimating serum, and it works much more quickly. It seems for a minute that Herbert is actually on the money about something for once.
Seems that way.
Yep. Unfortunately, wouldn't this just be the worst time for Meg to go wandering around the hospital trying to find where her father and her boyfriend are?
Yeah, they've been missing for quite a while, and she's been stuck with no jaw, so...
Yep. And wouldn't you know it, this is precisely the moment she walks in. Her dad, at this point, is hiding in the corner acting feral.
Well, he's awake, and he's got them both in a chokehold simultaneously, because zombies are very, very strong, so he's got one of them in each hand, lifted off the ground.
Yep. And if you actually look closely, you can see the hand, which I think is holding Dan, because he's closer to the camera, is the hand that had his fingers bitten off, and you can quite clearly see the makeup where it's not quite working on a Blu-ray, unfortunately.
Oh yeah, he's barely, touching the throat, and Dan is shaking around like he's being choked.
But when Meg finds everyone, everything has gone to hell. Mace comes in with her, and Herbert tries to do his best to explain what's happened. His explanation basically boils down to a big boy did it and ran away. The dean went mad, and a dog ate my research, and the cat's on fire, and I don't know what happened, and cheese it! Except he doesn't, unfortunately.
Meg accidentally backs up his lie by saying he was just angry, so she gives him his motive.
Yep, he just had some kind of psychotic break and got his fingers bitten off somehow. They never really comment on that section.
Bit off his own fingers, I guess. That's how mad he went.
He bit them off and he put them in the mouth of a corpse because he wanted to frame them that poorly. Yes, that's what makes sense.
Yep. I mean, this was a huge turn in the film for me, where things get beyond the point of no return, and the main characters are clearly completely fucked, and the sheer absurdity of reality allows them to wriggle out of it simply by telling a lie that makes more sense than the truth.
Yeah, no one in their right mind would believe we brought someone back to life, it killed your dad, then we brought your dad back to life, and then shit got wacky.
Yeah.
He had a psychotic break, winds up being the more believable thing, even though it feels unbelievable in the moment.
Oh, yeah. And they get away with it. And it's amazing. And the rest of the movie gets to happen. And the characters have developed a huge amount over the course of that one scene.
Yep. We see a tiny little bit of humanity in Herbert West as well, with the way he puts the blanket around the borderline catatonic Dan at this point.
Yeah, Dan literally collapses into a fetal position on the floor, and Herbert swoops in and comforts him.
Yep. But, again, as with all things, you have to ask yourself, is he doing it because he actually cares about his soon-to-be partner in crime? Or definite partner in crime at this point, actually, now I think about it. Or is he just doing it to keep him sweet? Because he then pulls out the tape recorder and says, "It's okay, bro. I got it all on tape."
He recognizes that at this point, Dan is the only person who could ever be this far in deep with him.
Yeah, those two are basically joined at the soul now.
Yep, they're the only two who could possibly comprehend the truth, so they gotta stick together.
So next we get a cutscene from the Integral Cut where we find out that West appears to be going through some kind of drug-induced withdrawal.
Oh, that's where they put this scene. That's weird.
Yep. Dan goes to Herbert's room, following him, and finds him trying to inject his own reanimating serum into his arm.
Yeah, he's shooting luminol, which is a touch that they added to the film for some reason.
Yep. Unfortunately, his hands are trembling so much he can't actually do it, and asks Dean to do it. Dan. I keep thinking it's Dean Cain, but he's a shitbag.
Yeah, it's hard because there is a character who is the Dean, and we got to talk about him frequently, so...
It's really confusing.
Yeah, I'm prone to slip-ups there as well.
Yeah. He asks Dan to do it for him because his hands are shaking that much. He says it's a weaker version of the serum that he only uses to keep his brain sharp and to lessen his need for sleep. For my money, it's better without this scene because it makes more sense as a character if it is, no, he's just really like that. His brain doesn't work the same way ours does, rather than he's strung out on glow stick juice.
Yeah, absolutely. This should have been cut in the scripting phase. This absolutely should not have made it to shoot, but for some reason it did. It's a cute little intimate moment between Dan and Herbert where they are helping each other out like bros.
Yeah, but on the whole, no, this definitely feels like it was something that should never have been anywhere near the film to begin with.
Absolutely, yeah. Like you say, it cheapens the character and it wastes time.
Yep. So now we get to Meg meeting her dad as he is now in a padded cell.
Yep, as guided by Dr. Hill, who is helpfully leading her through what she ought to do.
Yeah, as far, again, thanks to the lie that everyone told, they believe that there is nothing wrong with him except the fact that he's had a mental breakdown and he is now gone feral. And he's also covered in blood, but we're not going to talk about that one right now.
Yeah.
And again, another scene from the Integral Cut. He tries to hypnotize her, but all he does is hypnotize her to start calling him Carl. Which, given what we'll see later on, seems like he's wasting his time there.
Yeah, I mean, lucky for us, they get interrupted. The hypnotism or just their awkward interaction gets interrupted by the Dean in a zombie form, smashing his head against the window.
Looking like a feral version of Danny DeVito as the Penguin from Batman Returns.
Yeah, and this is where the actor really starts stealing scenes, because he is hysterical. He's so funny. His faces are wacky as hell.
If you have seen this film, go back and watch this scene, but only pay attention to the Dean. His entire performance is better than most film movies.
Yeah, they decide to do exploratory surgery on the Dean. Dr. Hill convinces Meg that it is necessary, and he demonstrates what he's going to do on an anatomical head diagram that he has on the desk. A three-dimensional shape of a head, and he points to where he's going to drill in to get that lobotomy done.
Yeah, and maybe it was just me, but the implication I got was that he'd always really wanted to do something like this forever, because he seems really excited to do this.
I mean, it's his one actual invention, is that laser drill, so all he has is a hammer. Everything looks like a nail.
He's like a barbecue dad who just got a new set of tongs. No, these ones are made of titanium. They're really cool. Okay, but that's not how you make cereal, Dave. Come on.
He's going to make the most of those brain removal tongs, but that's going to happen off-screen as we cut to Meg confronting Dan for the first time after the whole rampage.
Yep. This scene is longer again in the Integral Cut, which has a little bit of Herbert West laughing at a book of medical mishaps, which is cute, and I feel like that should have been kept in. That's the one bit I would say is kind of funny.
Fair enough. I say when in doubt, cut it. That's the editor's way.
But they start talking about what happened with his dad. With her dad. She's still believing that he's off his rocker. Dan confesses he's not insane. He's dead. To which she replies, "You're insane." And I have expected her to follow up with, "And you're dead."
But that's just a little scene to get Meg up to speed with what's going on and get Dan and Meg together.
She still believes that her father is insane and her boyfriend's kind of a dick.
Yeah. We want the two of them doing some Scooby sleuthing.
Yep. But while that's going on, Dr. Hill is visiting Dr. West.
The confrontation we've all been waiting for.
Oh, yes. He's on West's turf now as he actually goes down into the basement where he's been working. The Integral Cut has more hypnotism throughout this scene, which, even with the new framing of it all, doesn't really work.
They could not properly cut out all the hypnotism that occurs here.
Yeah, even with those scenes removed, the scene still feels kind of weird. Mm-hmm. It's an important scene, but it feels like they should have just reshot it entirely. Obviously, they didn't have the time or the money, but so it goes.
Yeah.
So, in this version, he talks West into showing him his reagent.
West makes terrified eye contact and slowly hands over the notes.
Yes, and then he gets West to show him how it actually works by putting some tissue from the, presumably the deceased cat, under a microscope and eyedroppering the glow stick juice in.
Oh, yeah.
And then while he's busy saying, "Yes, your research will make me famous," as he's been trying to talk him into handing over his research and all the details.
One small important thing from the Integral Cut is that in his hypnotism, he says, "You will be my assistant," and that Dan Kane, he will disappear.
Yeah, so odds are he would have been the next test subject.
Yes, indeed. They were going to rub out Dan.
But as he's busy jizzing himself over the dead cat tissue under the microscope, Herbert sneaks over to the corner and grabs something.
Just a little 7-foot-long shovel.
And then skitters back over like a really suspicious-looking crab.
Notably, the shovel has a square blade.
Yep, very sharp-looking blade in close-up. And then just as Hill turns round to talk to him, bam! Right over the head with the shovel.
Yep.
And then as he's recoiling on the ground, hits him in the neck with a shovel and calls him a plagiarist.
Yes, he digs the shovel itself into his throat, cutting all the way to the spine, and then he puts his heel on the blade of the shovel and pushes it all the rest of the way through the spine, so as to fully decapitate Dr. Hill.
And this is another scene which, again, everyone raves about. First, you see him thrust the shovel down, a couple of spurts of blood, as he calls him, a plagiarist, and you think, oh, okay, that's all we're getting to see. And then it cuts to the blade of the shovel buried in his face.
Yep, just hitting the floor around Dr. Hill's neck.
And then the head rolls off and falls to the side. You are unprepared the first time you see this happen. It is just shocking that they actually went there.
Yes, it is intensely violent in a film that thus far had only been like blunt, throwing people around and stuff.
Yep. Bit of biting, bit of scratching. The cat scratches on Herbert's face never vanish the entire film.
It's true, yeah. He has scars across his face for the rest of the film.
And now Herbert has to work out what to do with this decapitated body and head.
Yep. He's rescued his notes, but now he's got guts all over the room.
So what does he do?
Well, first he takes the head and he impales it on a spike, which... The director says Brian Yuzna came up with that, and Jeffrey Combs says he came up with that.
Yeah. It varies depending on who you speak to. To be honest, I would be more inclined to believe it was Combs himself who came up with this one.
Yep.
Just because of all the little touches he added throughout the movie.
It definitely seems his style, the sort of thing that he would come up with.
Yep. Tries to put the head in a little metal pan. I think it's the sort of thing they use for cleaning surgical tools.
Mm-hmm.
And it keeps just falling over. So he picks up a letter spike used for holding notes, puts that in, plonks it in, and goes, that works.
There we go. Nice upright head.
And then it occurs to him, hang on a minute, this is a freshly deceased body. That gives me an idea.
Yes.
A science idea.
It may be decapitated, but we're still going to play with it.
Yeah, I mean, so far we've seen that the serum only works when injected into the brain. What if the body doesn't have a brain to begin with?
Yeah, inject the heart and see what the hell happens.
Why the hell not?
Yeah, something happens. What are the odds?
Yeah. Weirdly, he has more success with this body than any other, because this is the only one which has managed to maintain its sentience.
Mm-hmm.
Starts bouncing his pencil off the head in frustration or irritation, and then the eyes pop open. And the sound effects in this scene are really uncomfortable.
Yeah, there's a constant sound of what was clearly hamburger meat being squished around in a large bowl. Super wet hamburger meat.
Really uncomfortable, rubbery squelching. And listening to this with any kind of good sound setup, I recommend you do and do not do this, because it will freak you out. Don't listen to this with a good pair of headphones in. You will be uncomfortable.
Yeah. So Dr. Hill's first words back to life are, "You bastard."
Said with almost as much venom as when he was called a plagiarist.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost a real pay on evil unto evil moment.
Yes. This is actually taken from a later chapter of the story.
Mm-hmm.
The character is Ronald Hill, not Carl Hill. And he was a pilot who got splattered in World War I. But on board his plane when he crashed it was Major Sir Eric Moreland Chapman Lee, DSO.
Hey, Macarena.
Yeah. Yeah, they chose the character name that was less of a mouthful for the sake of the film, and they chose wisely.
Yeah, I'm gonna say not hewing too closely to the source material was a good idea in that one.
Yes.
Jesus Christ.
So Sir Eric Moreland Chapman Lee was a acolyte of Herbert West, actually. He found a guy who also was able to learn the art of reanimation, and he felt could be a worthy successor, but he got decapitated in a plane crash. So West recovers the body and injects it, and the body comes back to life, even though that's all he injected. The head also comes back to life, across the room with no injection whatsoever. It's a badly written story.
I mean, a lot of his work-for-hire stuff was, shall we say, of varying qualities.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, to be fair, Lovecraft himself was embarrassed of this story, so...
Yeah, he absolutely grew to despise the Re-Animator series, if only because he wasn't getting paid much for them.
Yep.
I think he was only getting paid like 5 cents per story, which even back then was nothing.
Yeah, so it was just throwaway schlock, and that was a part of it.
Yep. And after he calls him a bastard, the corpse, which, lest we forget, also had reanimation fluid pumped into it, sneaks up behind him, grabs him, and slams his head into the desk in front of him.
Yep. Knocking him out cold.
While this is going on, Dan and Meg are busy trying to investigate what's been going on with Dr. Hill. Break into his office, start going through his files, and uncover something really uncomfortable.
Yes, Dan is actively going through his file cabinet, finds a file marked Meg Halsey, pops it open, and it is full of little mementos of his own girlfriend.
Yep, in one of the commentaries, Jeffrey Combs refers to it as his fetish file, which I'm going to say is possibly one of the better things you could have called it.
Another example of Jeff Combs getting just way too into character, because that is exactly what Herbert West would say.
But we go back to Herbert, and the basement has been completely ransacked. Everything, his notes, his reanimation fluid, everything has been taken.
Yep. West's baby. He freaks out like he lost a child.
Yep. Considering that this was done by a head remote control piloting a body from a distance, that's really impressive. I couldn't do that, and I've still got my head on my shoulders.
Nixon's head and the headless body of Spiro Agnew stole his research.
Ah!
That's the one.
Dan comes back, finds out what's happened, asks him... His first thing is to go, Hill's dead? To which Herbert responds, sort of, maybe, I don't know.
Not anymore. And the one thing that backs Herbert off the ledge is that he remembers he still has some of his reagent up in the fridge upstairs.
Yeah, the only place that he didn't think to look, which, I'm going to say fair, time is of the essence.
Yep, he's a headless body. His investigation checks are rolling pretty low at that point.
We see that the headless body and head now have plans as they go to the morgue. Mace gives zero fucks about anything, has no peripheral vision whatsoever as he sees this body sidling up.
Well, Dr. Hill is in incredible disguise. His headless corpse, you'd never know that it was a headless corpse, because he put the anatomy dummy of the head that he demonstrated the surgery on top of his own headless body, so... Yeah, he's got just a goofy plastic head on his shoulders and his own head in a duffel bag. So that when Mace asks, "Is that you, Dr. Hill?" he says, "Me."
Oh, I didn't know you had Kenny from South Park there with you. Go right on in, Doc.
Yep, pretty much.
Just the lengths you will go to not give a fuck when you are being paid minimum wage.
Yeah, I'm fully on Mace's side.
Mace did nothing wrong. Hashtag.
Yep. Secret hero of the movie.
So they go into the morgue. The body and head get everything set up. Head gets placed into another metal pan with more blood. It's kind of suggested that he needs the blood to, I don't know, stay comfortable.
Yeah, for some reason he just needs bags of blood pumped into his neck wound. And indeed he gets them from his headless corpse, so I guess that works out. It's another needless little touch, but it's something. And it sort of pays off in the fact that his head and every zombie's face is constantly drooling chunky blood.
Yeah.
I don't know why that's a side effect of zombification, but they're all drooling blood nonstop.
Yeah. It looks like they've just been biting the outside of their mouth and just letting the blood fly.
Oh, yeah.
So Dan rushes to see Meg again. When he finds her, she asks what's wrong, and he basically goes, not much. How are you? I'm fine. Is your dad? Oh, your dad's... Oh dear.
Yeah, they sort of agree that it would be better for both of them if they just separated and never saw each other again.
Which I'm going to say fair.
And then Meg says, "I just can't quit you." And just as they're about to embrace, her dad knocks down the door and grabs her.
To which everyone gives an audible, "Oh, thank God." Her dad knocks out Dan, who suffers repeated blunt force head trauma throughout this entire film, and drags off Meg, who, does she pass out or does she get hit? I forget.
They don't show anything. They just show him grabbing her and covering her mouth, so knocks her air out or something. She's unconscious one way or another.
Yeah, because she is very much unconscious through the next scene. And I'm going to say, probably for the best.
Yeah, she wouldn't want to be there for the beginning of it, and the less she's conscious of it, the better.
Yeah.
This scene is traumatizing for the viewer, much less the participants. In fact, it's so disturbing that the actors themselves were deeply horrified by the scene.
Especially the actor that played Dr. Hill. Mm-hmm. He was, he did it, but he wasn't pleased.
Yes. Spiritually bereft was the quote he gave of his experience doing this scene. Well, there's no use just beating around the bush.
Yeah, I'm going to say trigger warning.
Yes. Speaking of the bush,
oh, that was unnecessary.
Dean Halsey drops his daughter off next to Carl Hill's severed head, who lasciviously eyes her up and down, and then the Dean rips all of her clothes off. Yes,
and we get to see, shall we say, three of the things that Barbara Crampton is most famous for.
That's for sure.
Her screaming.
She really does have quite a bush going on. I thought maybe it was a modesty merkin.
Nope. All natural, baby.
In the commentary, they confirm no merkins were used at any point in the film. They had them made, and then they refused to use them for so long that the prop department threw them away.
Dr. Hill guides her dad, I suppose, controls him, however you want to put it, to tie her to the autopsy table. No, we don't know why it's got leather straps already attached, and the less you think about it, the better.
Good point.
During her struggle, she knocks the head off the body, and the body just flails around almost like it's embarrassed by the sudden revelation.
Yeah, she pops awake, sees a severed head staring at her and, like, licking its lips, and, like a hulking man standing over her while she's naked and strapped down, and then she swings at the head, and the head flies off because it was plastic. Leaving just a bloody stump, and she is all the more horrified. It's a profoundly horrifying scene to even fathom.
And then it gets worse.
And then it does get worse, impressessively.
The body picks up its head. The head says, "I've always loved you, Meg." After the body has fondled her, I should point out.
Oh, yeah.
While she's unconscious, and then starts working its way down her body.
Yes, there is oral stimulation, which is all the head can do at this point. And just as it is going for the genitalia, mercifully, West kicks the door down and interrupts the whole proceeding. It still wasn't soon enough to save David Gale from his wife shouting, "How could you?" at the screen and walking out during the debut of this film.
So, I've got a few things to say about this sequence.
Yeah, I mean, it's not the worst thing that's ever been filmed. I mean, we're probably going to talk about more disturbing scenes in the future, but
no
good
doubt.
God, the reality of it is what makes this such a affecting scene, a legendary scene.
Yeah, there's three things which I want to really hit on here. First off, this is a perfect example of stopping a scene before it goes too far.
Oh, yes. You are so relieved when West walks in.
If they'd stopped it a second or two earlier, you would almost be like, oh, okay, they're pulling their punches, given everything else it's wussing out. If it had gone further, it would have gone from absurd to just plain grotesque.
Yeah.
So the point that they cut everything off is just perfect.
The entire movie loses its humor value if they get any further than what they did.
As I said, the point they cut it off, it keeps the absurdity, which is just chef's kiss.
It gives you an opportunity to recover.
Yeah.
Any further moral event horizon, there's no coming back. You've lost your audience.
Exactly. Second, Barbara Crampton, perfect in this scene.
Oh, God, yeah.
The way she screams, you believe that she is actually terrified out of her mind in that particular moment. She could not have played that bit any better.
Thankfully, the commentaries are very, very eager to point out how brave of an actress she is for doing this scene. And
100%.
They really spell out how much they respected her as a person and didn't use it as gross exploitation and didn't try to push the actress beyond what she was willing to do. They had her on board and they were on board, and there's mutual respect that was not common in 1985, unfortunately.
Basically non-existent at that point in time.
Yeah, this scene would have had an intimacy coordinator in the modern day. Back then, they thankfully didn't need it in this case, but in other movies we're going to talk about, they needed it and they didn't get it, and bad things happened as a result.
Yeah, they didn't just need it, they needed lawyers on set.
Oh, yeah. Crimes occurred on film.
But thankfully, before things go too far, West, as you said, comes in and immediately starts shit-talking the headless body, saying, no one's going to believe him. Who's going to believe a talking head? Get a job in a sideshow.
The delivery is flawless, and he actually sort of regrets it, because there are two laugh lines so close to each other that people, laughed over the actual punchline, which is get a job in a sideshow.
Yeah, it's this entire scene, he's just sort of like, oh, hey, naked girl, you fucker.
Yep, there's that plagiarist, which is the greatest insult he can possibly fling. He spits it with such bile back when he killed the guy.
Yep. He's completely reserved throughout the entire film, but he reserves his hatred for this one dickhead plagiarist, and it is perfect.
Yep. Oh, and for the record, the writer called the head giving head the first visual pun. Which is incorrect, but he still was very proud of it.
Points for trying.
Yes. Congrats, Dennis Paoli. You sort of made the thing that makes this movie legendary, despite all the other good qualities that it has. Like when they talk about this movie in that shitty movie, American Beauty, they just talk about the head giving head.
Yeah. Which was another film that was probably terrible things happening on set.
Dear God, yes. It's a movie about Kevin Spacey wanting to have sex with teenagers.
So, Dr. Hill, by response, says, okay, cool, glad you're here. Zombies, attack. And then everybody who, at this point, you've just completely glossed over, jumps up as one. And it winds up being one of the most effective scenes in the entire film. Yeah,
they've been shuffling around these corpses the entire movie. It turns out it was all extras that they were going to introduce later on, which is really exciting. They went down the list of what happened to each of these people to make them die. Now we're going to see it.
Yep. Came up with little backstories for all of them. Like one guy was run over by a car, one was shot in the head, one burned to death.
Oh, yeah.
And the amount of detail is gratuitous, frankly.
Yeah, this is pretty much their best special effects work. Every zombie looks amazing.
This was really the money shot.
Yep, and they're all naked, so...
Yeah, so more zombie dong, but also, to those interested, a little bit of elderly zombie titty.
Yeah.
I'm sure there's someone who wore out the tape on this particular section, and I begrudge that pervert their enjoyment.
And this scene, for the record, is the payoff for the entire hypnosis side plot.
Yes.
It's supposed to explain why Dr. Hill can control his own headless body and why he can control all the zombies.
Yep. In the integral cut with the hypnosis, it's suggested that that's how he's controlling them. In the unrated cut, they kind of hint that he's using the laser drill, which makes about as much sense.
Yeah, I mean, it's an explanation, and that's all you need.
Yeah. So, as Herbert's being assaulted by the undead horde,
yes,
Dean Halsey kind of comes to his senses and rescues Meg and West, proving that he's actually a better hero than Dan, because he actually managed to accomplish something.
Yes. And it's a big, success of the resurrection potion, that it allows a person to retain some of their soul, if you're persuasive enough.
Yep, yeah. And then he promptly tries to headbutt the head, so maybe he's not all in there after all. And
as he is rebelling against his master, Dr. Hill, he's squeezing the head, which breaks the control over the zombies. So the zombies all freak out as well.
Yep. And start attacking the cabinets and all the chemicals and so forth that are stored within them.
Well, they're going to, but first, in all the chaos, Dr. West gets a opportunity to break out 2 giant glowing syringes completely full.
Yes, that's right.
Every other dosage has been like a quarter syringe, but these are 2 completely full ones.
Yep. He actually shouts, "Don't worry, I've got a plan." And that plan is to overdose?
Yeah, he screams overdose like he's doing a Dragon Ball Z power move.
Yeah. I've seen it suggested that he was basically trying to do to Dr. Hill what happened to Gruber at the beginning of the film. He was just trying to give him an overdose so that he would essentially explode.
Yeah, pop him.
Which it kind of does, in a way. The body falls over, and the chest starts erupting, and the organs grow to about 15 times their normal size.
Yes, he brings the organs to life.
Yeah. The intestines burst out of the rib cage, which has the actual rib cage itself has a nice little flappy effect on it, which is quite funny, and starts strangling him.
Yeah, he gets anacondaed by the large intestine.
And you better believe he don't want none.
He sure don't.
The last we actually see in the film is Herbert throwing his research notes in the reagent to Dan, who showed up in all this chaos.
Just before that, though, there's a hilarious shot where Dan and Herbert are, like, mingling their fingers. They can almost reach each other. Dan's about to save Herbert. And then they zoom out of the shot, and they're just lying on the floor 2 feet apart. All Dan had to do was, like, nudge himself slightly closer, and he could have saved Herbert.
That's right. It's like, I remember thinking it was like the Rambo parody from the Weird Al movie, UHF, where he's taking aim with a bow at a nondescript South American generalissimo type who's firing at him, and the pair of them are like 2.5 foot between them.
Yeah, if they hadn't done the zoom out shot, it would have been so much less silly, but they left it in the movie, and this is the death of Herbert West, wrapped in intestines.
He is absolutely not coming back from this one. He is dragged off into a meaty abyss, never to be seen again.
As the room bursts into a chemical fire from the zombies freaking out and flipping over everything on the shelves.
Yep. Dan manages to drag Meg out.
Although, like you said, they do rescue the notes.
Yeah.
Herbert hurls his notes out of the room, which is his baby, of course.
Yep. The Dean gets torn apart bodily by zombies in silhouette, which is actually a really nice shot.
Oh yeah, that's an amazing shot. Oh, also the final fate of Dr. Hill. The actor's body double for one scene is literally a big glob of hamburger meat with a wig on it.
That's right.
That's how badly he gets squished.
His head gets pancaked. He will never come back. He is gone for good.
West dead forever. Hill dead forever. Now what happens to Meg?
No way they can reinflate that skull.
Oh yeah.
So Meg and Dan run for their lives to get to the elevator. Unfortunately, just as they're getting in, they are followed by another zombie who grabs hold of Meg and starts throttling her.
Well, there's a zombie that was on set nicknamed Gesundheit. He's the zombie who had a shotgun wound to the face. He's the guy who they went to the prop department and said, "Where are Merkins? We haven't used those. We need to get one on this guy because we're going to have him fight in a long shot." And the prop lady said, "We threw him out." So they spray painted his penis black.
That's right. And you can see that in glorious high definition.
You certainly can. What you cannot see, though, is that Dan reaches into his skull and pulls out his eyeball to kill him. That was an actual, like, preserved cow's eye, and you cannot see it in any shot.
Yeah, you kind of see him grapple with the side of his head. If you don't know what's actually going on, you're like, why isn't he just shoving him?
He was supposed to be pulling the eyeball out, and he had a prop eyeball, and he was absolutely disgusted by it, and it's not in the final movie.
So they managed to get in, and that's when Meg starts getting strangled.
Yes, Burn Ward Zombie shows up, gets his hand around her throat.
Yep. And Dan, maintaining the consistency of everything he's done in this film, runs away and doesn't try and fight the zombie off.
To be fair, they show that the zombie is too strong to break the grip.
Yep. So he runs off and grabs a fire axe, runs back, and then hacks the arm off the zombie.
Yes.
The actor behind the zombie himself, in real life, only had one arm. So, in a bizarre way, they were more or less forcing him to relive the worst day of his life.
Yeah, the actor was an amputee, and they amputate him again on screen.
Yes. Would you mind doing this? Yeah, sure, no problem. I'll just be in my trailer rocking back and forth uncontrollably for the next hour.
Then there's a cute little shot of the hand continues to strangle Meg and knocks her clean out. And then he finally pries it off of her neck, and it's still twitching on the floor.
Yep, the arm, which at this point is obviously an arm through a hole in the floor, is still flopping away.
Yep.
He checks Meg and finds that she's not breathing. This brings us full circle as Dan brings her up to the ward, which is now in complete chaos because there's fire alarms going off everywhere. He takes her to the same treatment room, presumably, and once again starts doing chest compressions on her.
Yes, indeed. Mirrors the opening scene and was shot the same day as the opening scene.
Yep. So he tries to do chest compressions on her, but once again, unfortunately, she doesn't make it.
Yep, just like the opening scene. Dan can't save her no matter how much CPR he does.
The doctor, once again played by Stuart Gordon's wife, tells him, I'm sorry, but she's gone. But this time she actually says it with more sympathy for him.
Yeah, clear sympathy. This was her first acting role, and she is very, very good.
Yep, she only has like 3 scenes in the entire film, and she's remarkably good in all of them.
Yeah,
she
absolutely.
would go on to star in most of Stuart Gordon's other movies.
Yeah.
Usually playing bit parts again.
Yep, a nice, cheap, reliable actor from Stuart Gordon's stable.
Everyone ushers out of the treatment room and leaves him to grieve by Meg's side.
But Dan still has the notes.
Yep, this is the point where Dan finally throws caution to the wind and remembers, hang on a minute, there's more reagent fluid in the bag. He looks at Meg, looks at the bag, pulls out the glow stick juice, gives her a hug, says he loves her, and then just as he's about to inject it into the back of her neck, the scene turns dark, except for the glowing syringe.
And then they slowly edit the syringe, emptying out into her brain. Completely black screen with Meg screaming over it. One last time. Roll credits.
Yep. As a final shot, it is perfect. I do not have anything bad to say about that. It tells you everything without needing to say anything.
I have something bad to say about it as a video editor only, which is that it looks like shit.
I was going to say, I bet I can guess what it is. It's the fact that they didn't quite crop it right the way around the syringe. So there's an obvious halo around it, isn't there?
They did it in editing. They could have done most of it in acting and then the rest in editing, but they did it with a freeze frame and a mask on the film, and it is very, very low tech, and it's just them saving the shot. But the thematic nature of the shot is so good that it totally makes up for the bad editing. Yeah,
it's, to be honest, the little halo around the syringe, you only really notice it in the Blu-ray HD version.
Mm-hmm. I mean, at this point, I've seen the movie so many times that when I see that shot, all I can think of is Beeba da Beeba, that's all, folks. As they zoom in on a little circle of the screen. But the first time I saw it, I was like, holy shit.
Yeah, it's, as an ending, small bits aside, for those who are pedantic about that sort of thing.
Couldn't be me.
It's like the entire film has been leading up to that scene, and it's just about perfect.
Oh yeah, absolutely. This is the payoff for the extremely efficient filmmaking and all the phenomenal pacing. They showed exactly what they wanted to build to in the ending, and they've been building to it the entire film, and they got there. They sort of did a accelerated Breaking Bad with the Dan Cain character. Finally got him to be the sort of person who would be Herbert West himself, given the opportunity.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the whole film's really just, if you want to look at it, be all arty-farty about it, the whole thing is essentially the downfall of two men for science.
Mm-hmm.
One who started off broken, and the other who gradually gave up all his morals along the way until he got to a point where he's like, this Herbert West champ had some good ideas.
Yes, and ultimately, even though he is doing this to save Meg, it is Herbert who has won his heart in the love triangle.
Yep. Best girl won.
Indeed.
And best girl was Herbert West. Getting the sentences I guarantee no one else has ever said. So.
And yeah, that sets up their sequel. They gotta have a sequel hook in a horror movie, so Dr. Hill, splattered. Dr. West, strangled to death.
Dead.
Meg, now a zombie, and Dan Kane, the new Re-Animator. Can't wait to see how all of that pays off as the plot of the next film.
Yep. And someday we will get to that film and discuss all the... None of that actually happens, I think?
Not a single word of what I just said is true as of the second film.
And nothing that happens at the end of Bride of Re-Animator carries over into Beyond Re-Animator.
Yeah, but Beyond Re-Animator may as well be non-canon.
Yeah. It's not without its charms. It's sillier than the other films, but I have a soft spot for it.
It certainly has its merits. It is so far inferior to the first two.
I feel like the problem with Beyond is the fact that it was made in, I think, 2001, whereas...
I want to say 2003,
Bride,
but thereabouts, yeah.
Yeah, early 2000s. And Bride was made 89, 90, I think?
Yeah, 89 came out in 90, I think.
So I almost feel like they waited too long to make it.
They sure did.
Stuart Gordon didn't really want to be involved with any of the sequels. I think he decided, you know what, I've done this film. Probably the film he's going to be remembered for more than any.
Certainly, now that he has passed away.
Yep. And he just sort of stepped back and went, nah, I'm good.
Yeah, it's a hell of a legacy to have, and I guess we can talk about the film's legacy at this point.
Yeah.
Extensive as it is.
Yep. Herbert West, Jeffrey Combs basically made the role his own. More people will be familiar with the film than the source material, which, to be fair, the source material is not that great to begin with.
Yeah, you want me to reread that quote about the bongos and the Congos?
I will give you so much money if you don't.
That means I can hold you hostage.
Oh, like you haven't already. Why else do you think I keep showing up on all your streams? Jesus Christ.
I am 100% the Herbert West of this friendship.
The Herbert West of podcasting.
Yeah. So this film was shot for about $900,000 of Brian Yuzna's own money, which is why they were allowed to do literally whatever they wanted with the film. No oversight, just full artistic expression.
And the film is unquestionably better for it.
Oh, absolutely. It's lightning in a bottle. They couldn't have made this film without those factors coming together.
No, this is, in terms of pacing, in terms of impact, storytelling, it should be required viewing in film school.
If you want the single most rave review that I can possibly give it, which should have been on the cover of the DVD and on the poster and on every piece of media ever promoting this film.
Oh, this is going to be horrible.
Mac Ahlberg, the cinematographer, was later on in his career working on a film with David Bowie as one of the actors. David Bowie came up to him, stopped him, and said, "You shot Re-Animator, right? That is my favorite movie." There we go. Re-Animator, David Bowie's favorite movie.
You know, I never thought I would have anything in common with David Bowie before today.
So like us.
Wow. So like us in his way?
On its $900,000 budget, they made about $2 million at the box office, so they got their money back.
Yep, it was almost the Blair Witch of its day.
In a way, it was a huge success with critics. Critics went fucking bananas for this movie. Roger Ebert was a gigantic proponent, talked about it everywhere all the time.
Which is weird, because his usual treatment of horror movies was to be incredibly dismissive of them.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't invent the term torture porn, but you kind of get the impression that he wished he had.
Yeah.
The fact that he liked this, don't always agree with him, but I would say I respect him as a critic rather than, like...
Even when I don't agree with him, he usually makes a good point, so... And it ended up being sort of the opposite of what the cast and crew expected. Film audiences enjoyed it, but not enough to really spread it by word of mouth. It only made $2 million, which is, it's not much for a horror movie at that time.
Yeah, although it did do roaring trade in video sales and on cable.
Yeah, absolutely. The video market is what made it into a cult classic. And that was primarily done with the R-rated cut throughout the 80s, unfortunately.
Yep, the inferior version of the film.
Big time. The worst possible version. Integral even beats it.
Yeah, and Integral... Just watch the unrated cut, folks.
Yeah.
If you've seen the film and you haven't seen the Integral cut, definitely give it a watch to see what was removed. And I will not be surprised if you walk away going, yeah, none of that needed to be in there.
Indeed. But this is a brisk 86 minutes. You have to watch it. If you can handle the head rape scene, you have to watch it. And if you can't handle that, I fully understand. I know people who want to love this movie, and they do love the sequel, and cannot watch this movie because of that scene. Do you think this movie would be remembered as widely if it didn't have that scene?
You know, that's a really good question, because
If you talk about the movie, it's the first thing you say. So
100%.
Yeah.
Like, I don't really remember when I first saw it. I probably saw it on British TV, which means it would have been cut to buggery to begin with.
Yeah.
That scene would have been truncated. I sincerely doubt we would have gotten the bush shots. Like, those would have been gone, no questions asked. The head going down, that probably would have been cut as well. So we would have gotten most of the scene, but the key shots, for lack of a better term, would have been excised.
Like, splatter films like this, they're sold on the moment.
Exactly.
If you want to tell anyone about the film, if you want to spread it by word of mouth, you have to say the most shocking part of it. And that is the most shocking part of this, or almost any movie.
Yeah, and let's be honest, like, this film went further than pretty much anything else throughout the 80s that I can think of.
It's up there.
Again, not to be all arty-farty, but I want to use the term transgressive. It goes where other films do not dare. And gotta say, it's better for it. We really need more films like this that do push the envelope that hard.
Yeah, that's another thing that probably appeals to queer culture, is the John Watersiness of it all.
Oh, perfect way of summing it up, yeah.
Yeah.
It's the horror movie version of Pink Flamingos.
So that's Re-Animator, my favorite movie.
Definitely one of my all-time favorites. Next episode, we'll be tackling something a bit more sedate, a bit more laid back. The family classic, Ichi the Killer.
Gather the kids. They're going to want to see this one.
They got to learn what it's like to be dipped in boiling oil.
Oh, God.
In the meantime, if you want to follow us, we stream together on Tuesdays.
Yep.
And you can find you over on Twitch at St. Fiendly, St. Fiendly.
Yes, Saint Fiendly.
Yep.
If you miss any of our streams, you can find me at youtube.com/Fiendly, Fiendly. And that's where you will see many hundreds of videos. I'm a very prolific YouTuber for well over a decade.
Yep. Tons of stuff that we've done together as well.
You can find my political video essay at youtube.com/thisreviewkillsfascists.
Highly recommended.
If you've made it this far, I am amazed and incredibly grateful, and I very much hope to see you in the next one, because we enjoy doing this and we would like to do more.
I've got a cat sitting in my lap. It's fantastic.
Well, let's shield his eyes from any further horrors and sign off.
Doodles.
Thanks for joining us. Have a good one, folks.
Hill took my serum, my notes, everything.
Herbert, you're insane! Now what happened
I
here?
had to kill him!
What? He's dead?
Not anymore.